The Labatt 50 GT endurance race is a unique event in Canadian motor racing. It's a 6-hour endurance race in the tradition of Le Mans, Daytona, and Sebring. Great drivers like Daniel Gaius and the Le Mans winner Derek Bell were just two of their very impressive international group that took part. Now, in this race, held at Mosport Park, the lead changed 12 times. It was a tremendous battle, and Paul Chater was there for Sports Weekend.
Driver's seat of this turbo Porsche, Derek Bell, fresh from winning his third 24 Hours of Le Mans, has 850 horsepower on tap, some 200 more than the fastest Formula One cars. The IMSA GT circus comes only once a year to Canada, to Mosport for the Labatt's 50, a 6-hour endurance race where tactics, finesse, and strategy play equal parts with the brutal horsepower produced by these cars, the most powerful race cars in the world. Car racing is always a team effort, but in endurance racing it becomes more so. Without long and intense preparation, no team can expect success. Derek Bell and owner and co-driver of the red 935 Porsche, Bob Aiken, spent several days at Mosport before the event. A driver of immense experience, Bell is also a technician who learned to develop and tune race cars like the Porsche with the great factory teams of Europe.
Well, it's going pretty well, really. We have the two cars here, and one is set up much harder than the other. And I think for this sort of circuit, it's a very undulating circuit, and it needs a car a little bit softer setup for it, because you've got there's quite a considerable number of changes of directions, and you've got a very slow, or in fact, two very slow corners. So, of course, naturally, you want to be able to go down to a low gear and have a lot of actual sort of grip and adhesion when you come out of the corner, which, with a very stiffly set car, you're inclined to get the car sliding a bit. But if it's softer, it grips and smoothly goes out of the corner.
It's gone. Straight.
Yeah.
This one on the left.
Yeah, it hits a couple of bumps on the straight, and it just goes like sideways, and the engine goes...
Aiken is the fine endurance racer who always finishes and drives with his head set firmly on his shoulders, not in the clouds. His search for success is relentless, seeking out the best in machinery and personnel that money can buy. Cars like the all-conquering Porsche and drivers like Derek Bell.
We knew right away when we met that we got along very well together, and I think that's one of the primary considerations, since you're spending really quite a few weeks of the year in very, very close contact, and it's good to have personalities that are compatible. We think alike, and we like a lot of the same things, and so we get along very well. We're always very glad to get together again to do another race.
What about driving styles? How important is it to match your style with your co-driver?
Certainly, I think it's very important. Derek is a great deal more experienced than I am, and I'm benefiting very much by being associated with him. Throughout my career, I've tried to team myself with drivers that are better than I am, so that I'll benefit from that exposure.
But of all relationships, the most intimate is between driver and car. Sensitivity to its innermost workings are of the greatest importance.
We've got a row of lights up here on the dashboard, which obviously flash in our face if there's anything wrong. The one on the left, for example, is the fuel light, and that will start flashing if we're getting very low on fuel. Probably mean I've got about 5 miles left of fuel. This one over here is the oil light. If that flashes, I know I have a problem with the oil pressure. And of course, one little gem we have here, the most important gauge of the lot, is the rev counter. The main needle actually swings around, and we rev it to about 8,000 revs. And there's another needle that follows it and will actually stop at the highest point that your revs reach. So when you come in the pits and you say to the mechanic that In fact, you used 7,500. He says, no, you didn't. You used 9,500. You're a naughty boy. Now onto the main gauge, which is really the most important gauges. Here we have the boost gauge, which tells us just how much boost we're running. And down here, we have a knob that we can actually turn up the boost as we're going along, so we can run it anything between 1.2 boost right round to 1.56 or 1.7 just by turning this, but you have to turn it quite a few times, and we'll probably use that when we're actually qualifying or else later in the race when you're chasing somebody hard. We have a fire extinguisher system throughout the car which is activated by this lever here which you pull, and you can see the holes in the pipe all around, and they go right the way around through the engine compartment which spray out the foam should there be an event of an accident. And here we have the main master switch which switches on the whole system. That is about
Also at Mosport before the event was the Porsche driven by Bonnie Henn and owned and co-driven by her father Preston. Also on their team is South African Desiree Wilson, an experienced driver who knows that teamwork and understanding between all involved is essential to success.
Yes, I think it's very important that each driver gives a little as well as takes, and we can do that, you know, between Preston, Bonnie and I, although Bonnie and I are very similar sizes, so we fit into the car pretty good. We've got similar temperaments, which is great. Preston's quite a lot bigger than us, but we adjust the seat for him, and everybody seems to fit in quite easily, and, you know, I think we make a pretty good team.
About the selection of the third driver for your car for this weekend? Now, this is the first time you've all been teamed together, is it not?
Yeah, we've had Desiree drive before. I've driven with her at Sebring, but my father was in a different car. I think we're both pretty level-headed, and she's definitely a strong driver.
Is it an asset or a liability sometimes driving on a team with your father?
Oh, it's an asset. It has to be, yeah. I respect him. I listen to pretty much everything he says.
But however good the team, the car must also be driven like the wind for success. Fierce and fast, the John Paul Racing team is lucky. Its own relationship is built right in.
Special sort of arrangement, and that's your father and son. Does it make a difference?
Oh, definitely. You know, until John started driving with me, I went through 3 or 4 or 5 co-drivers, you know, some of the best in the business, but you don't have the same communication as you can have with Johnny. We can trust each other completely. We make a mistake, we own up to the mistake. We know we're not going to beat on the equipment, and we don't have an ego trip as far as, you know, between each other. We're not trying to beat each other. We're trying to beat the other guys. Johnny's a little bit quicker than I am. I know, and he knows it, so, you know, we're not proving anything. So, with another driver that, you know, has got something to prove to the world or to other sponsors or to other car owners, he may beat on the car a little harder than you would in an endurance race. And, you know, it really makes a difference.
John, when you started out racing, were you trying extra hard to beat your dad, or were you just out competing against the other drivers?
No, I was mainly trying to stay up with him. But he's been at it a long time, and he knows all the setups, and it's easy to go fast for a lap or two, but it's hard to do it consistently, and that's what makes a good driver.
At the racetrack, practice ends. Race day arrives. And now, the sunlight glinting off their windshields, they climb Mosport's Andretti straight on their pace lap. The low, sleek Lolas of Ted Field and Chris Cord leading the field, while just behind were the Porsches of Derek Bell, and beside him, John Paul Sr.
Generally, the Lola's a bit on the pole. The Porsche is more reliable. You know, it's a 6-hour race. It doesn't make any difference whether you start 20 feet farther to the front or not. So look for us in the 5th and the 6th hour, and we should be running strong. And the Lolas may or may not be.
But out of sight at corner 9, the leading Lola of Ted Field was pouring it on. It shot into view, slingshotting into the start-finish straight in copybook fashion. Behind the John Paul Porsche and Cord's Lola were neck and neck, with the Porsche asserting itself on the dive into corner 1. At corner 3, the front 3 cars held their positions, with Bell's Porsche just behind. The Interscope Lola powered its way up to corner 4, shot under the bridge, and braking heavily, snaked its way down into Moss Corner, the slowest part of the Mosport lap. Now stretching ahead of field is the notorious climb up the Andretti straight. Uphill all the way, taking 2 corners flat out. Field and the rest must wind up for each gear, accelerating from 50 miles an hour to nearly 200. It's here that the awesome power of the turbo Porsche is expected to gain over the Lolas. Working furiously, Field corrects slides before they develop and rounds corner 10. Behind, the order is unchanged with Derek Bell and Aiken's red Porsche. Under the bridge, Bell watches the battle for second place. Inside a real race car actually racing, the smooth progress seen from trackside becomes a hectic cut and thrust, each driver exploiting the particular advantages of his own car. The best brakes in the business aiding the Lola into the corners, the power of the Porsche helping its drivers regain time under acceleration. It doesn't look as though any of these drivers are taking things easy. Obviously, none of them wrote the book on classic endurance tactics.
You know, one mustn't let people imagine that endurance racing means that you have to be a pansy and it's not the guys that are quick, it's the guys that are reliable. The good people that win endurance races are very, very fast drivers and probably the fastest drivers in the world. It's just that they also have that ability to go fast for 3 hours on the trot. Any top driver in the class that we've got here today, the drivers are all very capable of doing top sprint racing and being as quick as anybody.
Here at the long uphill grind of the Andretti Straight, Bell expects the Porsche's power advantage to tell. Sure enough, as he notches fifth gear, the turbo power pulls him right past the Lola into third place. Bell sets his sight on the Porsche just ahead. He must now outdrive John Paul, although the heady rush of the opening laps is abated and race strategy has again become important. Still leading, Ted Field is raising a few eyebrows. His co-driver, Danny Ongaias, is one of the quickest in the business. But now Field has improved so much he can hold his own with his famous co-driver. Bell continues to hurry John Paul, but equally close behind him is Chris Cord, whose low, sleek, aerodynamic Lola contrasts with the squat, angular Porsches ahead. The Lola stunned the racing world when it ran away with last year's championship, its first season of competition. As an alternative to the then unbeatable Porsches, the car was such a resounding success that the rules needed further evolution to enable the Porsches to once again be competitive. The choice of race cars to owners like Bob Aiken has become very difficult.
The 935 is really a fiendishly evolutionized version of the 911. Well, the Lola, of course, is a mid-engine car, a real race car chassis. And they really began to do quite well last season. And I know last year at this time, everybody was racing around trying to get a car other than a 935. The 935 has always been criticized for having the engine in the wrong place at the very end of the car instead of in the middle like the Lola is, which of course is where it should be for a race car. And yet, in spite of the fact that the design goes back to the Volkswagen design in 1935 and everything seemingly is in the wrong place and the car appears awkward and too large, and nevertheless it has done very well over the years and it keeps getting better and better and better. And I'm always reminded of the expression that you can't make a racehorse out of a pig, but you can make an awful fast pig.
John Paul's awful fast pig was still third ahead of Cord's Lola. Behind but lapped was David Deacon's BMW. In the pits was Preston Hen.
Mechanical problem. What's wrong with the car?
We were leaking oil out of all vent, so we're going to fix it, but we're probably not going to go back out right now.
At corner 10, Deacon's black BMW led his class. It was to be a short-lived lead.
It's not worth worrying about losing a couple of seconds. If you cut behind somebody, it's best to let him have his moment, wait behind him and go by afterwards rather than try and get by. Probably have him off, and also he'll probably end up sticking you off the road as well. So, you know, it's better just to wait. If in doubt, wait.
Incredibly, Deacon walked away, although the car was badly damaged. While it was being cleared from the track, the pace car came out, and immediately cars began diving into the pits. Bell, Paul, and Cord, while Field continued in the lead. Pitting under the yellow is an excellent tactic. The cars on the track are limited by the pace car to very low speeds, so time spent in the pits is soon made up. But endurance races are sometimes won in the pits, and while the Bell Aiken crew refueled the car, John Paul left, gaining several places over the red Porsche. Chris Cord's Lola left too. Reacting less quickly than the other front runners, Field came in a lap later. The beautiful black projectile came to a halt, and the Interscope team sprang into action. Veterans of Indy racing, their pit work was as fast as any. but through bad luck or bad timing, pitting a lap later than Paul, Bell and Cord would see the Lola drop to 8th place. Field rejoins the fray, but not before Bell is passed, still under the yellow.
Particularly around here, there's going to be so much darn traffic. It's going to be a real awful performance trying to get by everything. I can see it's going to be just diabolical. I just think it's a matter of you get to know who's in the car, and you can see that he's bad news. And it's pointless, you know, talking to them at the driver's briefing, because once they put their helmet on, their brain goes into neutral.
Bell's comments underline the special dangers of endurance racing. With the lap times of some cars markedly slower than the times of those engaged in the battle at the front, the slow cars are being lapped every 10 laps or so. Each driver knows there's only so much holding back the front runners can indulge in, but that when bravado overtakes good sense, disaster will surely follow. In the pits, David Deacon.
David, it has to be disappointing not even an hour into the race and a crash. What happened?
Well, I was passing a Porsche into turn 1, and Del Russell Taylor tried to squeeze in on the inside of that. Obviously, you can't get 3 cars through in that same turn there. I don't know why. He just seemed to be impatient, and he decided he wanted to jam through, and he rode me through instead and put me into the guardrail.
How badly damaged is the car?
Very bad, actually. It's what I tried to do was keep the car sideways so I didn't go head first into the guardrail. I managed to get it sideways, but we smashed it. You know, we were doing 100+ miles an hour, and we smashed into it 3 or 4 times and completely cleaned off the left side of the car. So, yeah, it's pretty bad.
At the front, Bell is hot on the trail of John Paul's leading Porsche. Racing hard nonetheless, both Paul and Bell keep wary eyes, focused by the Deacon incident, on the back markers as they pass. There are still 5 hours to go, but both these very experienced drivers will balance saving their cars against the psychological advantage of leading. With the first fuel stops soon due, they would both like to build themselves a lead that will enable them to complete pit stops without losing their advantage. Bell pours 600 horsepower onto the track. Both cars pass lap cars as if they were standing still. And as Bell peaks in 3rd, notches the car into 4th, he senses an advantage. He passes John Paul, taking the lead, watching the crest ahead for hidden danger. Then into the S's. Bell's hands twitching on the wheel, sensing and correcting, coaxing the car to the edge of the track in copybook fashion. Bell leads the race. Inside, his heart beats faster. This, nothing else, is what Derek Bell goes racing for.
Well, there's nothing like winning. Everybody wants to know a winner. 2nd place is nothing. To win is just superb. I mean, it's the only thing that is worthwhile.
He must fight back his exultation of leading, control the heady rush that may cause error. Only 1 lap counts, leading on the last one. To get there, we'll need much more than just his efforts.
Oh, totally a team effort. Endurance racing is. We're just the sort of cap on the mountain or the icing on the cake, the drivers. The other guys have worked for a year or 6 months or whatever the period is to get that car ready for that one race. And 20 or 40 or 80 people have been working to that one end, and these 2 guys come along, professional people, come along and they put them in the car, and of course they expect us to deliver the goods. The team effort is all in sports car racing. Everybody has to give their most, but we couldn't do without the team behind us, that's for sure. I mean, we wouldn't be successful if we didn't have the crew behind us, and they're the ones that stand in the wings and don't get any of the applause.
On the plunge into Moss Corner, Bell brakes heavily. After an hour's racing, nearly 100 miles, he is hot and tired. But on the exit, he is still fast and neat, knowing that John Paul and Chris Cord are close behind, filling his driving mirrors. Bell sees slower cars ahead. Already he must be planning to pass. The car ahead moves over. But as Bell commits himself to overtake on its left, it moves back. Instantly, John Paul flashes by. Turning it on again, Bell passes a slower car, mentally cursing its driver's inattention. But Bell has lost momentum. Entering the S's, Cord's red Lola also passes him, relegating him to 3rd spot. With only 1 hour gone, the Labatt's 50 has had 3 different race leaders. In more ways than one, temperatures are rising at Mosport, and there are still 5 hours to go.
Right now, though, we continue our coverage of the Labatt's 50 GT endurance race in Mosport. And here again, for Sports Weekend, Paul Chater.
With just 1 hour of the 6-hour Labatt's 50 gone, cars again streamed into the pits as yellow flags were waved around the course. Calmly, Bob Aiken prepares himself for his first stint in the car. He leads the Drivers' Championship for the first time in his 20-year career. The tension is high.
Well, I am a very competitive person. I'm always seeking and welcoming a competitive challenge. To me, motor racing is an absolute joy when everything is going right, which isn't very often. Really, it's a big-time motor racing can be a lot of fun some of the time, but there's a lot of suffering that goes along with it. But when the car is right, and when the track is right, and when everything is clicking along, it's really an experience beyond adequate description.
Just 2 pits down from Aiken is the John Paul Porsche, narrowly leading the race. Into the car goes John Paul Jr., who gets underway as Aiken gets into his car. Derek helps him adjust his safety harness, but the seconds tick by. All this time, John Paul Jr. is increasing his lead. Well behind them, Jim Adams has clambered into Cord's Lola and roars past the still stationary Porsche. In 2 came Desiree Wilson, with flames belching from the Porsche's exhaust. Her views on racing are remarkably similar to those of Bob Aiken.
It's mainly in the blood, but I don't really find it fun. To me, it's very serious. Every time I sit in a race car, I put 100% into it. And for me, it's just very, very hard work. To succeed is such a challenge, and that's really why I do it, because it gives you such satisfaction when you do succeed.
Moving up the field is the Interscope Lola, now with Ongaias at the wheel. The mid-engine Lola is perfectly balanced and won't, as here, need to change tires as often as the heavier, more powerful, and less well-balanced Porsches. This fast pit stop gains Ongaias a place. Only John Paul and Adams' similar Lola now leading.
Desiree, your first hour in the car, how was it so far?
So far, so good. The car's running pretty well. We just find that the temperatures are very, very warm. And unfortunately, we had to pull out our actual race car, and we're actually running our spare car, and it hasn't quite got all the cooling facilities that the race car's got. So the drivers are suffering quite a lot because there's no cool air coming into the car at all.
Displaying a maturity not seen here last year when he crashed while leading, John Paul Jr. maintained his lead. Since last year's race here, he's had a string of successes and is very close behind Aiken in the Drivers' Championship. Second is Adams' Lola. But everyone's eyes are on Ongaias. The black Lola is eating up the ground, separating it from the leader. It's a crucial stage of the race. In Aiken's car, Bob is warming up to the job in hand.
You have to have done quite a bit of racing before you can really become a good endurance driver. You sort of have to get all the basic animal instincts out of your system, and as some people refer to it, the red mist out of your eyes, which sometimes comes over a driver when he's getting in early on in his career. You've got to be able to sort of ratchet yourself back a little bit and to hold yourself in check. Car very nearly at its potential, but really not quite as fast as we would run a sprint race. We shift a little bit lower on the RPM and keep the turbocharger boost a little further down. So we're perhaps 5% short of absolute maximum. Primarily, you have to have a certain empathy with the car. You must baby the car and watch every single shift and every application of the brakes and turning in so that you don't hit curves, and generally have to be very, very tidy in driving the car around the track.
As Aiken's stint at the wheel continued, Derek Bell took a well-deserved rest in the pits.
Derek, after your first hour in the car, how does it feel?
Very warm, thank you. It was just unbelievably hot when I had the yellow out and the pace car out, you know. It was far better when we were going fast. As soon as we started to go slowly, there's just no air in the car at all. We have all the windows sealed, so it was ridiculous.
How is the car running according to plan so far?
Oh yes, very much so. We sort of, were like second, and then I popped in the lead for a few laps, and then back to third when I got held up the hill, and both second and third man got past me. But no, it's going very well. Perfect.
Suddenly, Aiken was in the pits, his mechanics working frantically at the front of the car. It is here where many of the electrical components are housed, and a loss of power was threatening the Porsche's 5th spot. As a faulty circuit breaker is promptly fixed, 3 other cars pass. Inside the car, Aiken sits calmly as the work is completed, then rejoins the race in 10th place. Meanwhile, at the front, Jim Adams has closed the gap between his Lola and John Paul's Porsche. Into corner 10, Bonnie Henn is just in front of John Paul Jr. But as the cars exit, Adams takes a normal line, while the Porsche dives for the inside. Adams has chosen right. At corner 1, Jr. is forced to give way, and Adams, with a very intelligent piece of driving, takes top position. He is the 4th driver to lead the race. Adams leads the race for 12 laps, but at the end of the hour, the time approaches for pit stops and driver changes. Chris Cord watches his teammate pass. Adams's fine drive will be a tough act to follow. Much will change with these pit stops. In the pit of the race leader, as the flame-proof suited crew wait to dump fuel, the vital liquid that will power Cord's Lola for another hour. Another hour closer to what his team hopes will be the checkered flag. Adams brings the Lola to a halt, and the crew springs into action. John Paul Jr. passes into the lead, but as he passes his pit, his father signals. He is also due for a pit stop and driver change. The crew stands by. But no one is forgotten on Gaius. He and the black Interscope Lola are clearly the fastest combination at Mosport, eating up the deficit incurred during those earlier pit stops. The Lola is running faultlessly. Its sleek beauty, a joy to the enthusiast. The John Paul crew waits. John Paul Sr. paces. The Bell Aiken Porsche has also pitted. Slowed by those electrical problems, they are now a lap down. Bell sits inside the car, eager to rejoin the fray. On the back straight, the new leader is preparing for his pit stop, rehearsing his moves. He must bring the car to a halt at exactly the right spot, or lose precious seconds repositioning the car. Junior knows that Adams's Lola has pitted, but what he doesn't know is that the Lola is still there, losing precious seconds, about to be lapped as the Porsche slows to leave the track and enter pit lane. Junior leaves the car and his father climbs in. Now together they must readjust the driver's harness to accommodate their physical differences. Meanwhile, fuel gushes in, tires are changed. John Paul Sr. leaves the pit, still leading the race. Cord leaves his pit to rejoin the battle, but his long stop has not only lost in the lead and put him a lap down, but also he has now lost contact with the leader, a psychological boost to the John Paul team they will undoubtedly exploit. And behind the pits, John Paul Jr.
John, you must be fairly satisfied right now with the lead.
Well, the car's running fairly well. Having a little problem with the tires, but other than that, things going good.
It's because of the heat, the tires going away?
Well, I think so. The car had a little understeer when we came here at the beginning of the week, and as the fuel load goes down, the weight in the front gets lighter, and it's just an inherent thing in a Porsche, but it's doing fairly well. We're optimistic and hope to do well.
Ongaias's charge continues, gaining almost 5 seconds a lap as he drives flat out. He's still over a lap down on the leader, who continues driving conservatively, content to allow his lead to be reduced in the interest of a larger race-long strategy. Ongaias, however, knows only one strategy. The red mist rarely leaves his eyes. As he passes, Jim Adam was the coolest-looking man at Mosport.
Jim, coming into this pit stop, you're in the lead. Did you expect to be in front of the Porsches at this point?
Yeah, we did. We were definitely planning to get out in front as soon as we could, and there was some confusion, but as soon as we got in front, we wanted to set the pace.
Any problems with the car?
Pardon?
Any problems with the car?
I got so much oil on the windshield the last 15 or 20 laps I couldn't see, so it made it hard to drive, but the car's running fine.
Some of the drivers have complained about the heat. Are you having any problems?
No, it seems fine. It's a nice day.
The race continues, long, noisy, hot. Inside the Bell Aiken car, Bob drives. He knows only a miracle can put him in the winner's circle today. Though in 5th spot, he's out of contention. Now he must drive to finish, hope for trouble with those ahead, and watching his mirrors, allow those engaged in the battle for the lead to overtake, as here John Paul Sr. does.
Above all, we're trying to win the Endurance Racing Championship, which is a season-long program. And getting good points in each race is what adds up to winning that championship. We must finish, most of all, finish well, and then given the fact that we're running well, we will try to win. But as we always say, we must finish the race. In order to finish first you must finish.
Up ahead is Cord's Lola, lapping like Aiken with the leader, but several laps back. Now hot on Aiken's trail as they approach the crest before turn 2 is Ongaias, still gaining fast on everyone in sight. He passes Aiken, then closes on Cord, his car snaking and twitching, sure signs of the driver on the ragged edge. Then, next lap, Cord was in the pit once again. Something was amiss, and as the crew milled around the ailing car, John Paul, with Ongaias right behind him, passed, and Cord went down another lap. In the car, Cord was complaining of handling problems, and having removed the nosepiece, the crew inspects the steering components and the front wheels. While on the track, Ongaias pressures the leader, who, remember, is a full lap ahead of the number 0 car. Here was proof of John Paul's strategy. Ongaias pulls up and passes the Porsche on the very section of the course where the Porsche's power advantage should enable John Paul to pull away. As Ongaias unlaps himself, it is obvious that the Porsche team is keeping the turbo boost down, knowing that later, if necessary, they can turn it up and add over 100 horsepower to their efforts. But then the whole race turns around as John Paul comes into the pits. Now as Ongaias eats up the track, the car is motionless as Junior gets out and John Paul Sr. gets in. Working frantically, the crew and the drivers know Ongaias is at the far side of the course and now is accelerating up the Andretti straight. Soon he'll be in sight. The sunlight glinting on the Lola at corner 8, only seconds behind. The chase is on. The crowd watched, enthralled as Ongaias, off the track at 150 miles per hour, came into sight right alongside the Porsche. John Paul stayed ahead, but Ongaias, twice off the track again, was not to be denied, and to the roars of the crowd, took the lead. After leading for 5 laps, Ongaias pitted. Because the Lola is lighter and because the Porsche employs fuel-guzzling turbo power, the Lola should get through the day with fewer fuel stops. Though here tires are fitted, the well-balanced Lola will need fewer changes. So as John Paul inherits the lead for the 5th time, the Interscope team, knowing that John Paul will have to refuel soon, are confident. All that remains is for Ongaias to pace himself and the car. Now it's John Paul Jr.'s turn to pace in the pit. With Ongaias close behind his father, Jr. knows they'll lose the lead. And with Ongaias and the Lola clearly the fastest combination on the track, they'll have to go like the wind to even keep up. For 9 laps, Ongaias drove flat out. Fearful, no doubt, of the Porsche's ability to turn up the turbo boost, gain 100 horsepower, and carve whole seconds from its lap times. The gap continued to widen, but then, to groans from the crowd, which always loves a charger, the Lola suddenly appeared in the pits for an unscheduled stop. As a matter of course, the car was refueled, but there was an air of resignation in the pit as team owner Field talked to Ongaias. The crew was peering at the back of the car, and it soon became obvious that the Lola had developed transmission faults. Ongaias left the car, the strain of his efforts plainly etched on his face. John Paul passed, now firmly entrenched in the lead. As Ongaias relaxed, John Paul was behind his pit.
Now with Ongaias and Field out of the race, your excitement must be building.
Well, I think it's getting less exciting, you know. It's a shame they fell out because we were having a good race with them, back and forth. I guess we're 5 laps in the lead now, so now we're just holding our breath and hoping the thing will last. You know, we're taking it real easy on the car.
You've instructed John Jr. to slow down a little?
Oh, yeah, he knows. We've dropped our lap times about 5 or 6 seconds a lap, and, you know, we're 5 laps in the lead. The only thing that'll beat us now is the car.
As the shadows lengthened, the Porsche continued to run faultlessly. With a 5-lap lead over the second-place car, the Pauls circulated, losing ground in a calculated effort to save the car. In the Aiken car, Bell, in 4th place, pursued a similar strategy, and in the last few minutes found himself behind the leading car, its driver going gingerly, staying well away from trouble, still enjoying a secure lead as everyone on the track concentrated on finishing this grueling race. Up the back straight, the Porsche moves over, and Bell pulls back a lap, waving to John Paul, who can now almost coast in. As the 6 hours are completed, John Paul Sr. brings in his car to a well-deserved victory, ahead of the Cord Adams Lola. Today, the Porsche had outlasted the Lolas. In a race in which there had been 12 changes in the lead, the classic tactics, the understanding between father and son, and top-class teamwork and preparation had proved an unbeatable combination. Endurance racing is hard work, but like all difficult endeavors, success is all the sweeter to everyone involved.
John, congratulations. Did it go according to plan?
Yeah, better than the plan. But when guys fell out, you know, it was real easy. It was a Sunday drive after that.
Were you going very easily the last hour or so, just stroking the car?
Yeah, we're listening to all the funny noises in the car, you know, and it's like you're on cruise over the mountains. All of a sudden, you're listening to everything when you're in an airplane. So,
the laurels of the Labatt's 50 go to John Paul Sr. and Jr. The Aiken Bell car crossed the line 4th, and to Bob goes the last word.
Just being a participant is enough for me, really, to be a part of this fantastic show. And I'll never downplay the opportunity that I have to come to these races, win, lose, or draw.